I still remember the sound of my phone vibrating on the hotel nightstand in Winnipeg. It was 2:47 a.m., and I'd just fallen asleep after a long day of medical conferences. The notification made my heart skip a video message from my grandson, Liam. He was supposed to be safe at his grandmother's house in Thunder Bay, over 700 kilometers away. I fumbled for my reading glasses and pressed play. The screen was dark, illuminated only by what looked like the dim glow of a tablet. Then I heard his voice, whispered and trembling. "Grandpa, Tom, it's me. I don't know if you'll get this. Grandma Diane found my other tablet and smashed it, but I had this old one hidden in my backpack. I'm in the storage room in the basement, the one with no windows. She locked me in here because I had a meltdown at the mall. She said I embarrassed her in front of her church friends. That was, I think 5 days ago. Maybe 6? I'm losing track. There's a sleeping bag down here and she brings me water once a day. But Grandpa, she says, I can come out when I learn to act normal. She keeps saying if Mom knew how to discipline me properly, I wouldn't be this way. My tablet's at 8%. I don't know how many more days." The video cut off. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped the phone. I called Liam's number immediately. It went straight to voicemail. I tried Diane's number next. No answer. Then I called my daughter Rebecca's cell phone. Even though I knew she couldn't answer, she'd been dead for 14 months. Brain aneurysm at 37. No warning, no goodbye. Just gone, leaving 14-year-old Liam behind. I should never have agreed to let him stay with Diane and her husband Howard. But Diane was Rebecca's mother-in-law. And after Rebecca died, she'd seemed so concerned, so helpful. She'd offered to take Liam in while I sorted out the estate and legal guardianship. She'd promised it would be temporary, just until things settled down. She'd even cried at the funeral, holding Liam close, saying, "We'll take care of him like he's our own." What I didn't know then was that Diane blamed Rebecca for everything she considered wrong with Liam. His autism diagnosis at age 6, his special education classes, his stimming behaviors, his difficulties with loud noises and unexpected changes. Diane had always believed that Rebecca was too soft, too permissive, too willing to accommodate, instead of forcing Liam to toughen up and fit in. I was out of bed and packing my bag within 2 minutes of watching that video. My phone showed the message had been sent 9 hours earlier. 9 hours. My grandson had been locked in a basement for nearly a week, and I'd been sleeping peacefully in a hotel bed while he waited for me to save him. The front desk told me there were no flights to Thunder Bay until 6 a.m. I couldn't wait. I rented a car and started driving through the darkness, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. The highway stretched endlessly before me, forest and rock on either side, occasional transport trucks roaring past. I kept checking my phone, praying for another message, some sign that Liam was okay. Nothing came. I tried calling the Thunder Bay police, but the dispatcher said they couldn't act on a wellness check without more concrete evidence of immediate danger. A child staying with his legal guardians, even if temporarily confined, didn't meet their threshold for emergency intervention. They suggested I arrive first and assess the situation, then call back if necessary. The drive took just over 7 hours. Dawn was breaking as I pulled into Diane and Howard's driveway on a quiet residential street lined with tall pines. Their house was a modest 2-story with vinyl siding, a tidy lawn, and a small wooden cross hanging beside the front door. I'd been here twice before, once for Rebecca's funeral reception, and once 3 months ago when I dropped Liam off. I remembered how Liam had clung to me that day, his fingers digging into my jacket. "Don't leave me here, Grandpa Tom," he'd whispered. "Something feels wrong." I'd told him it was just adjustment anxiety. I'd promised him it would only be a few months. I'd failed him. I rang the doorbell, waited, rang again. Finally, Howard opened the door, squinting at me in the early morning light. He was in his late 60s, heavy-set, with thinning gray hair and reading glasses perched on his nose. He looked genuinely surprised to see me. "Tom, what are you doing here? Did we have a meeting scheduled? Where's Liam?" I kept my voice level, but my heart was pounding. "He's asleep. It's barely 7 in the morning. I need to see him. Right now." Howard's expression shifted from confusion to defensiveness. "Is something wrong? Did Diane call you?" "No, Liam did. Let me in, Howard." He hesitated, then stepped aside. The house smelled like coffee and something else, cleaning products, maybe bleach. Everything was immaculate, not a dish out of place. not a speck of dust on the furniture. Family photos lined the hallway walls, but I noticed there were none of Liam. Plenty of their son Marcus, Liam's father, who'd walked out on Rebecca when Liam was 3 and hadn't been heard from since. But no photos of my grandson. Diane appeared at the top of the stairs, wearing a bathrobe and slippers. Her silver hair was perfectly styled even at this hour, and her face bore the tight, pinched expression I'd come to recognize as her default. She'd always been the type of woman who cared deeply about appearances, what the neighbors thought, what her church friends said, how things looked from the outside. "Thomas," she said coolly, "this is unexpected. Where is Liam?" "He's being disciplined. He had an incident at the mall earlier this week, and we're teaching him that actions have consequences." The calm, measured way she said it made my blood run cold. "You locked him in your basement." Her eyes narrowed. "He told you that? He's being dramatic. He's in the storage room because he needs time to reflect on his behavior. Children with his condition need structure and boundaries, Thomas. Rebecca never understood that. She coddled him, made excuses, let him think his tantrums were acceptable. Show me where he is, now." "Excuse me? This is our home, and Liam is under our care. Liam is my grandson, and you have no legal custody of him. I have temporary guardianship papers, and I'm exercising them right now. Either you take me to him, or I call the police and tell them you're holding a child against his will." Howard put a hand on Diane's shoulder. "Maybe we should just—" "Fine." Diane cut him off. She walked down the stairs with rigid posture, brushed past me, and led me through the kitchen to a door I'd assumed was a pantry. She pulled out a key from her robe pocket and unlocked it. The basement stairs were steep and narrow. The air grew colder as we descended. Diane flipped a switch, and harsh fluorescent lights flickered on, revealing a finished basement with concrete walls painted beige. There was a rec room with an old television, some storage shelves, and at the far end, another door, also locked. Diane made no move to open it. She just stood there, arms crossed. I pushed past her and tried the handle. "Liam, it's Grandpa Tom. I'm here." "Grandpa?" His voice was so small, so broken. "Is it really you?" "Open this door right now," I said to Diane. She didn't move. "He needs to apologize first. He needs to understand that." I turned to her, and whatever she saw in my face made her take a step back. I spent 30 years as an ER doctor. I've seen cases of child confinement. I know what neglect looks like, what abuse looks like. If you don't open this door in the next 5 seconds, I'm calling 911 and reporting both of you for child endangerment. Howard, who'd followed us down, reached around Diane and unlocked the door. The storage room was barely 2 meters by 3 meters. No windows. A single bare bulb hanging from the ceiling. There was a sleeping bag on the concrete floor, a plastic bucket in the corner that I realized with horror was being used as a toilet, and my grandson huddled against the back wall. Liam looked so small. He'd always been slight for his age, but now he looked skeletal. His clothes, the same hoodie and jeans I'd seen him wearing months ago, hung off his frame. His dark hair was greasy and unwashed. His face was pale, with dark circles under his eyes. When he saw me, he started crying. I was across the room in 2 strides, dropping to my knees and pulling him into my arms. He was shaking. His whole body trembled like he was freezing, even though the basement wasn't that cold. "I've got you," I whispered. "I've got you. You're safe now." "She said you didn't want me." Liam sobbed into my shoulder. "She said Mom died because I was too much work and stress, and now nobody wanted to deal with me, and I should be grateful they were willing to try to fix me." "None of that is true. None of it. Your mother loved you more than anything in this world, and so do I. We're leaving, right now." I looked up at Diane, who was standing in the doorway with her arms still crossed, her face a mask of righteous indignation. "You should be thanking us," she said. "We took him in when no one else would. We tried to help him, but he's impossible, Thomas. He can't control himself. He makes scenes in public. He refuses to make eye contact. He rocks back and forth and makes those noises. Do you know how humiliating it is to take him anywhere? People stare, they judge. They think we're bad grandparents, because we can't control one teenager. Get out of my way. We have rights too, you know. We're his grandparents. We deserve. You deserve nothing. You tortured a child. You locked him in a room for days because he couldn't meet your impossible standards of behavior. That's not discipline. That's abuse." I stood up, keeping one arm around Liam's shoulders. He was still shaking, clutching my jacket with both hands. We moved toward the door, and Diane actually tried to block our path. "You can't just take him. We'll call our lawyer. We'll fight for custody. Marcus is our son, which means we have more legal standing than you." Marcus abandoned his family 7 years ago. He's paid 0 child support. He has no parental rights. And you just admitted on camera that you locked Liam in this room for nearly a week. I pulled out my phone, showing her that I'd started recording the moment I entered the basement. "Every word you just said is documented. Your admission of confinement, your description of why you did it, your complete lack of remorse." Her face went white. "If you try to stop us from leaving, if you try to contact Liam in any way, if you even think about challenging my guardianship, I will hand this recording to the police, to Child Protective Services, and to every media outlet in Ontario. Do you understand me?" Howard pulled Diane aside. For the first time, I saw something like shame in his expression. "Let them go, Diane. Just let them go." We walked past them, up the stairs, through the kitchen. Liam's backpack was by the front door. I grabbed it. We got to my rental car, and I helped him into the passenger seat. His hands were shaking so badly he couldn't fasten his seatbelt, so I did it for him. As I pulled out of the driveway, I saw Diane standing in the doorway, her face twisted with fury. But we were free. I drove straight to the Thunder Bay Hospital. The emergency department was quiet for a Wednesday morning. I explained the situation to the triage nurse, showed her the video Liam had sent me, and within 20 minutes we were in an examination room. The pediatrician who examined Liam was a young woman named Dr. Patel. She was gentle and patient, explaining everything she was going to do before she did it, giving Liam time to process. She documented everything: his dehydration, his weight loss of nearly 8 kilograms, the muscle weakness in his legs from being confined, the raw patches on his wrists where he'd scratched himself during anxiety attacks. "He needs to be admitted," Dr. Patel told me quietly while Liam was changing back into his clothes. "He's severely dehydrated and malnourished. We need to run some blood work, get him on an IV, make sure there's no organ damage from the prolonged stress and deprivation." "How long will he need to stay?" "At least 3 days, maybe longer, depending on what the tests show." But Thomas, she paused, choosing her words carefully. What was done to him wasn't just physical neglect. The psychological trauma of being locked away like that, especially for a child with autism who already struggles with anxiety and sensory issues. He's going to need therapy. Probably for a long time. I nodded, my throat tight. "I'll make sure he gets whatever he needs." While Liam was being admitted, I called my lawyer, Janet Morrison. I'd known Janet for 30 years. She'd handled my divorce, Rebecca's estate, and was in the process of finalizing my guardianship papers for Liam. I told her everything that had happened. "Send me that video immediately," she said, "and the recording from the basement. I'm filing an emergency motion for full custody today. With this evidence, Diane and Howard won't be able to contest it. I'm also going to recommend charges be filed for child endangerment and unlawful confinement." "How long will the custody process take?" "With what you've got? 2 weeks, maybe 3. But Tom, you need to understand what you're taking on. Liam's going to need stability, routine, therapy, possibly medication adjustments. You're 64 years old. Are you sure you're ready for this?" I looked through the window of Liam's hospital room. A nurse was helping him get settled into bed, and he was staring at the IV line in his arm with that intense focus he got when he was trying to understand something new. He looked so young, so vulnerable. "I'm ready," I said. The custody hearing took place 3 weeks later in a Thunder Bay courtroom. Janet had advised me that Diane and Howard would likely show up with their own lawyer, trying to paint themselves as concerned grandparents who'd made some mistakes but meant well. She was right. Their lawyer, a stern-looking man in his 50s, named Richard Pemberton, stood before the judge and delivered a carefully crafted narrative. Yes, they'd confined Liam, but only for a few hours at a time, never days. Yes, they'd been strict, but they were trying to help him develop life skills. Liam's autism made him difficult to manage, and they'd simply been overwhelmed. They loved him. They wanted another chance. Then Janet played the video message. We heard Liam's terrified whisper, his uncertainty about how many days he'd been locked away, his fear that his tablet was dying and no one would find him. We heard him say his grandmother had told him this was his fault, that his mother died because of the stress he caused. The courtroom was silent when the video ended. Janet then played the recording from the basement. Diane's voice, clear and cold, explaining how Liam embarrassed her in public, how he needed to learn to act normal, how Rebecca had ruined him by being too soft, her complete lack of remorse, her belief that she was doing the right thing. Judge Marion Chin, a woman in her late 50s with sharp eyes and no-nonsense demeanor, leaned forward. "Mrs. Hutchins, I'm going to ask you a direct question, and I expect a direct answer. How long was Liam confined in that storage room?" Diane's lawyer whispered something to her. She lifted her chin, trying to maintain her dignity. 5 days. But we brought him meals. We checked on him regularly. We weren't trying to hurt him, Your Honor. We were trying to teach him that his behavior has consequences. What behavior, specifically, are we discussing? He had a meltdown in the mall. He knocked over a display, made a scene. People were staring. My friends from church were there. It was humiliating. He knocked over a display because someone changed the route you normally took through the mall, Janet interjected, reading from a statement. Liam has autism spectrum disorder. Changes in routine cause him significant distress. The meltdown you describe was a panic attack triggered by sensory overload and unexpected deviation from his established pattern. And your response to this was to lock him in a windowless room for nearly a week. We didn't know what else to do. You could have called his grandfather. You could have called his therapist. You could have taken him home and given him a quiet space to decompress. You had dozens of options that didn't involve unlawful confinement and psychological torture. Judge Chen held up a hand. I've heard enough. Mrs. Hutchins, Mr. Hutchins, I'm granting full custody to Thomas Brennan, effective immediately. You will have no visitation rights, supervised or otherwise. I'm also recommending that the Crown Attorney's Office review this case for potential criminal charges related to child endangerment. Diane stood up, her face flushed. This isn't fair. He's our grandson too. Marcus is our son. Marcus abandoned his parental responsibilities 7 years ago, Judge Chen said sharply. And you abused your position of trust in the most egregious way possible. This child was placed in your care, and you systematically neglected and psychologically tortured him. You're fortunate that Mr. Brennan arrived when he did, or we might be looking at far more serious charges. Your Honor, please. My decision is final. This hearing is adjourned. I didn't feel victorious as we left the courthouse. I felt exhausted and heartbroken. Liam walked beside me, his hand gripping mine so tightly my fingers ached. He hadn't spoken much since leaving the hospital, communicating mostly through nods and head shakes. His therapist said it might take weeks or months before he felt safe enough to fully express himself again. We flew back to my home in Vancouver the next day. I'd already set up a bedroom for him, Rebecca's old room, actually, from when she was growing up. I'd painted it a calming blue-gray at the recommendation of Liam's new therapist, Dr. Sarah Kim, who specialized in autism and childhood trauma. I'd installed blackout curtains for when he needed darkness, and soft lighting for when the regular lights were too much. I'd bought the specific weighted blanket he liked, the noise-canceling headphones he used, the fidget toys that helped him process stress. The first few weeks were hard. Liam had nightmares almost every night, waking up screaming that he was back in the basement. He struggled with eating, his appetite diminished by anxiety medication and lingering trauma. He flinched at loud noises. He needed constant reassurance that I wasn't going to leave him, wasn't going to send him away, wasn't going to get tired of him the way Diane had claimed everyone eventually would. But slowly, gradually, we found our rhythm. I learned his routines and helped maintain them. Breakfast at 7:30, always the same 3 options he could choose from. School from 9 to 3, with his special education support team fully briefed on what had happened. Therapy twice a week with Dr. Kim. Quiet time from 4 to 5, when he needed to decompress alone in his room. Dinner at 6, with predictable options. Evening routine of homework, tablet time, shower, reading, lights out at 9. I retired from my part-time consulting work at the hospital to be fully available for him. My pension was enough to support us both comfortably, and honestly, at 64, I was ready to step back anyway. Being Liam's full-time guardian became my new purpose. 6 months after the custody hearing, Dr. Kim called me in for a session without Liam present. She sat across from me in her office, her hands folded on her desk, and said, "I want you to understand the magnitude of what you saved him from." I'm not sure I follow. Children with autism, who experience prolonged confinement and psychological abuse, especially when the abuse is framed as correction, for their neurodivergent behaviors have extraordinarily high rates of depression, anxiety disorders, and suicidal ideation. Liam was being taught that his authentic self was wrong, that his natural responses to overwhelming stimuli were moral failings, that he needed to be broken down and rebuilt to be acceptable to society. If that had continued for another few months, she paused, her expression grave. I don't think Liam would have survived it. Not physically, perhaps, but certainly not psychologically. The weight of her words settled over me. I should have come sooner. I should have checked on him more frequently. I should have trusted his instincts when he said something felt wrong. You can't change the past, Tom. What matters is what you're doing now. You're giving him safety, stability, acceptance. You're showing him that he doesn't need to change who he is to be loved. That's everything. As Liam healed, I started researching autism advocacy groups in Vancouver. I discovered that there was a significant gap in resources for families like ours, particularly for children who'd experienced trauma on top of their existing neurodivergent challenges. Most support groups focused on early childhood intervention or adults with autism, but there was little for teenagers who'd been through abuse and needed specialized, trauma-informed care. I had resources. Rebecca had left Liam a substantial life insurance policy, which I was managing as his guardian. I'd also inherited a fair amount when my own parents passed. I'd always planned to leave it all to Rebecca, then to Liam, but now I realized I could do something more immediate and impactful with it. I used $500,000 to establish the Rebecca Brennan Foundation for neurodivergent youth. The foundation's mission was threefold: provide financial assistance for therapy and support services for autistic children and teens, offer education programs for families and caregivers about autism, acceptance, and trauma-informed care, and create safe spaces for neurodivergent young people to connect with each other. We opened our first resource center when Liam was 15. It was a converted community center in East Vancouver with sensory-friendly spaces, quiet rooms, activity areas, and offices for therapists and social workers. We offered free or sliding-scale services based on family income. We hired staff who were themselves neurodivergent, creating employment opportunities while ensuring the people working with these kids truly understood their experiences. Liam helped design the sensory rooms. He explained what kinds of lighting felt safe, what textures were soothing versus overwhelming, why having multiple small spaces was better than one large room. He was nervous about sharing his input at first, worried that his preferences wouldn't be normal enough, but I reminded him that his experience was exactly what made his perspective valuable. The day we opened, 53 families showed up. Parents who were exhausted and overwhelmed, kids who'd been told they were too much, too loud, too difficult. Teenagers like Liam who'd been punished for responses they couldn't control. We welcomed them all. One mother broke down crying as she told me about her son, 11 years old, who'd been expelled from 3 schools for disruptive behavior that was actually panic attacks triggered by fluorescent lights and cafeteria noise. Everyone keeps telling me he needs more discipline, stricter boundaries. But I know that's not what he needs. He needs understanding. He needs accommodation. But I don't know how to advocate for him, and I can't afford private school. We got her son enrolled in our after-school program, connected the family with an education advocate, and arranged for sensory assessment and therapy. 6 months later, he was thriving in a new school with proper accommodations. This was the pattern repeated dozens of times. Families who'd been told their children were broken, that they needed to be fixed, that their neurodivergent traits were behavioral problems to be corrected rather than neurological differences to be accommodated. We gave them a different message. Your child is not broken. Your child does not need to be fixed. Your child needs support, understanding, and a world willing to meet them where they are. Liam turned 16, then 17. He started volunteering at the foundation, mentoring younger kids who were struggling. He was still quiet, still preferred routine and predictability, still needed his noise-canceling headphones in crowded spaces. But he was confident in himself now. He understood that his autism wasn't a flaw or a failure. It was simply how his brain worked, neither better nor worse than neurotypical brains, just different. When he was 17, I asked if he wanted to know what had happened to Diane and Howard after the custody hearing. He thought about it for a long time, stimming with his favorite fidget cube, before nodding. Okay, tell me. The Crown decided not to press criminal charges. They said it would be too traumatic for you to testify, and the case was complicated by the fact that they genuinely believed they were helping you. But Child Protective Services investigated them, and they were placed on a registry that prevents them from fostering or providing childcare. Diane's church friends found out what happened. Most of them stopped speaking to her. Does she still think she did nothing wrong? I don't know. I haven't had any contact with them since the hearing, and they haven't tried to reach out to us. Janet says they could have challenged the custody ruling but chose not to. Liam was quiet for a moment. Do you think she'll ever understand that I'm not broken? I don't know, I admitted. Some people are so invested in their view of how the world should be that they can't accept anything that doesn't fit. But Liam, what she thinks doesn't matter. What matters is what you know to be true about yourself. I know I'm not broken, he said softly. It took me a long time to believe that, but I know it now. Good. Don't ever forget it. Last month, Liam turned 18. We celebrated at the foundation with the families we'd come to know over the past 3 years. There was cake, decorations, and a presentation where several of the teenagers Liam had mentored spoke about what his support had meant to them. One girl, 14-year-old Zara, stood up and said, "Before I met Liam, I thought I had to pretend to be someone else to be accepted. I tried so hard to make eye contact even though it hurt, to not stim even though it helped me calm down, to be normal even though I didn't know what that meant. Then Liam told me something nobody had ever told me before. He said being myself was enough. He said I didn't owe anyone a performance of normalcy. And that changed everything for me." I watched Liam's face as she spoke. He was proud but also slightly embarrassed by the attention, his fingers moving in the familiar pattern of tapping his thumb to each fingertip in sequence. 3 years ago, he would have hidden that behavior, ashamed of being seen. Now he did it openly, unconcerned with whether anyone noticed or what they might think. After everyone left, Liam and I sat together in one of the quiet rooms. The lights were dimmed, and peaceful instrumental music played softly through the speakers. These rooms had become my favorite part of the foundation spaces where overwhelmed people could retreat and simply exist without demands or expectations. "Grandpa Tom," Liam said, "I've been thinking about something." "What's that?" "I want to tell my story. Not all of it, not the worst parts, but I want other kids to know that it's possible to survive something like what happened to me. I want them to know that the people who tell them they're broken are wrong." "Are you sure? You don't owe anyone your trauma." "I know. But I want to do it anyway. Maybe just write it down, share it anonymously on the Foundation website, so that when kids Google autism abuse or locked in basement, they might find my story and know they're not alone. If that's what you want, I'll support you completely." He nodded, then leaned his head on my shoulder, the way he used to when he was small. "Thank you for coming to get me. Thank you for not giving up on me. Liam, I will never give up on you. Never." We sat there in comfortable silence for a long time. Outside, the sun was setting over Vancouver, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The foundation would open again tomorrow, welcoming families who needed hope and support. Liam would mentor more kids who needed to hear that they were enough exactly as they were, and I would continue doing everything in my power to create a world where neurodivergent children weren't seen as problems to be solved, but as people to be celebrated. What happened to Liam in that basement was horrific. The trauma he endured should never have occurred. But from that darkness, we'd built something meaningful. We'd created a community of acceptance, a foundation that would outlive us both, a legacy that honored Rebecca's memory by protecting the child she loved more than life itself. Sometimes people ask me if I regret retiring early to raise Liam, if I wish I'd maintained my medical career, if I feel like I sacrificed too much. The answer is always the same. I didn't sacrifice anything. I gained everything that truly matters. There are lessons in our story that extend beyond our specific experience. First, trust your instincts. If a child tells you something is wrong, believe them. Don't dismiss their concerns as anxiety or adjustment issues. Children, especially neurodivergent children, are often dismissed and disbelieved, but they know their own experiences better than anyone else. Second, understand that neurodivergence is not a disease to be cured or a flaw to be corrected. It's a different way of experiencing and processing the world, When we try to force neurodivergent people to conform to neurotypical standards, we cause immense harm. Accommodation is not coddling. Understanding is not weakness. Acceptance is not giving up. These things are love. Third, abuse often hides behind the language of discipline, correction, and doing what's best for the child. Be skeptical when someone claims that punishment and confinement are necessary for a child's development. Real support looks like understanding, accommodation, patience, and respect for the child's fundamental humanity. Fourth, if you have resources, use them to create change. I could have left my money in investments, passed it on when I died, let it gather interest while doing nothing meaningful. Instead, I used it to build something that helps people right now, today, when they need it most. Wealth is meaningless unless it improves lives. And finally, healing is possible. The brain is remarkably resilient, especially with proper support. Liam will always carry the scars of what Diane did to him, but those scars don't define him. He's defined by his strength, his compassion, his determination to help others avoid what he endured. He's defined by who he chose to become, despite what happened to him. As I write this, Liam is preparing for his first year of university. He's been accepted into a social work program, planning to specialize in advocacy for neurodivergent youth. He'll live at home and commute to campus, maintaining the routine and stability that help him thrive. He's nervous, but excited, ready to turn his experiences into expertise that will help others. The foundation continues to grow. We're planning a second location in Surrey next year. We've helped over 300 families. We've prevented countless situations where neurodivergent children might have been abused or neglected by people who claim to be helping them. And every single day, I'm grateful I was in Winnipeg that night. Grateful I heard my phone vibrate. Grateful Liam had the courage and resourcefulness to send that message. Grateful for every moment since then, even the difficult ones, because they led us here. If you're reading this and you're neurodivergent, please know you are not broken. You do not need to be fixed. You deserve support, understanding, and a world that celebrates your unique way of being rather than trying to force you into a mold that doesn't fit. And if you're reading this and you care for a neurodivergent person, please remember, your job is not to make them normal. Your job is to help them thrive as themselves. That means learning their communication style, respecting their needs, advocating for accommodations, and never, ever making them feel like their natural responses to the world are something to be ashamed of. The notification sound that woke me at 2:47 a.m. shattered my world, but it also gave me the chance to rebuild it into something better, something kinder, something that honors the truth that every person, regardless of how their brain works, deserves dignity, respect, and unconditional love. That's the world I'm working to create, and that's the legacy I hope to leave behind.